Good afternoon. This is Deidra, and welcome to another episode of Educating While Black. This is a special edition as we are recording from the Pressbox Media Group here in Henderson, Texas. And I have a very special guest with me, Mr. Kaleem Bey. And I'm going to give him an opportunity to tell us a little bit about who he is, what he does, and what he stands for as it relates to the black family and the black community.
Thank you. Like the sister said, I'm Kaleem Bey, and I am a father, husband, grandfather, and consider myself to be a humanitarian. Humanitarian meaning I make it my business to be the best me I can be, you see? And then, of course, as a family man, teach the family the same vibration, and then we go out into, humanity and, assist humanity in the productive category.
Right. I was very excited to have the opportunity to sit down with you, as I know that some of our interests and our passions are in the same categories. Educating While Black is a podcast or an entity that specifically focuses on things that educate and empower and edify the black community, and I know that you are someone that is extremely passionate about black culture, black studies, and black history, and making sure that we as black people know truly who we are. So tell us a little bit about how you got to that place and why you feel that education and knowledge is so important for self, but as well as the black community as a whole.
I got to that place by I'm gonna go back to when I started the 7th grade. The 7th grade is when I started to go to school, public school, of course, with Europeans, so-called white people. Up until that point, it had just been, my people. And then from the 7th grade all the way to my senior year in high school, of course, I would, continue to go to school with, different cultures and experience them. And of course, I saw, where I had a what you call a militant spirit in me by nature coming up, anyway. But I saw how, what we can label as systematic racism, I saw how it worked, you see, and so in turn it grew this militant wanting to, see my people, overcome and accept this Underground Railroad type mentality to life.
Right.
You know what I mean?
And I want you to tell us a little bit about where that came from. I personally feel like a personal responsibility to the black community, perhaps sometimes to a fault. I think I found a little bit more balance to that in my later years, but I'm the daughter of a pastor, the daughter of a mother who's a teacher who's retired and been back to the classroom several times, but I definitely feel that teaching is a calling, and people who are passionate about knowledge and passionate about education, generally speaking, there's some type of tie-in as to why they feel that that's their responsibility. So I know that you have, several platforms in addition to your responsibility in your immediate family, but you have other platforms to where you take advantage of giving knowledge to others. So where do you think, tell us a little bit about where that comes from and why you feel that's part of your personal responsibility to give knowledge.
I heard you say that you are a daughter of a pastor.
Correct.
And I heard you say that you're a daughter, you come from the womb, let's clarify, of a teacher.
Correct.
You see? So that in itself is where we're connecting as it relates to the teaching part. You see what I'm saying? And I come from the womb of a teacher, but she never got to the level of actually being, a professor in college or public school teacher,
right,
etc. But she ended up always, when we were in church, being a Sunday school teacher. Be it, most of the time she was teaching the children's class as well. So that's where the passion for education,
right,
for me, and of course the passion for wanting to teach the babies, the young generation, because that's where my passion lies, is with the next generation.
Yeah.
So that's where it all came from right from the womb, just like you.
Yeah.
So we definitely, you know, shared that what is that, blessing? Yeah,
right.
Let's use that word.
Part of my definitely, I feel that the education or the teaching capacity is something that was directly connected to my mother and father. But a lot of my cultural understanding, or my study of history, or my study of self, you know, or knowledge of self, for lack of a better term, a lot of that came really my first year in college. I majored in African studies, and once I got a little bit of a taste of things that I didn't know, that led me down a path of understanding that made me very passionate about making sure that my children, one, knew who they were, and that in my every single role that I've been in since then, making sure that Black children know who they are. Yes. So some of the research and some of the advocacy work that we do with Educating While Black is specifically making people answer the question about what type of education do Black children need. And I think that a lot of that in the public school system, a lot of what's missing is the knowledge of self that creates a confidence in Black children of self-efficacy and their ability to achieve. But I know that path started for me really specifically as an 18-year-old freshman when I moved to Houston, Texas. And so for you, where did that cultural push come from, and that passion to make sure that you share that with your own family and those that are around you?
I got you. This is gonna sound funny. Of course, it's the first time I ever said it publicly, but I just was one of those spirits. I possessed one of those militant spirits. Once again, as a child, I could just remember in elementary forming a group of my friends, and the label that I gave our group or you know, our gang or whatever. I'm in elementary. I'm probably like 5th grade. Man, was the BBB.
The BBB.
Bad Black Brothers.
Oh, you had some people nervous at school.
And it was the you know what I mean, the to combat the KKK. Okay. That's why I came up with BBB. You see, I'm talking about I'm in elementary. Of course, my children, they done heard this story, but this is the first time I ever said it in public. And I'm saying that because it answers the question. You're like, I got an older brother. He was into the Nation of Islam. Right. You see what I'm saying? Malcolm X. We come from a church-oriented background. Right. I can remember when him and my mother would debate, you see what I'm saying, or whatnot. My mother, I come from the womb of a woman that at 18, 19 years old in the city of Milwaukee, state of Wisconsin, she was going to Black Panther Party meetings. Okay. She was going to the meetings then, you see what I'm saying, at 18, 19. So a lot of this is coming from the womb, and I just fast forwarded all the way up until like what you're saying, like college years, my college age, and I'm able to again see how this, what we label systematic racism, I'm seeing how it worked and being, of course, affected by it. Yeah. So it just it pumped it put cables on my militant chest. Right. You see what I'm saying? It charged me up even more to say, okay, my son and my daughter, you see what I'm saying? My grandson, my granddaughter, if I got anything to do with it, we have to be holistically educated. Right. And that, of course, fast forward all the way up until I'm grown, of course, as they say, you know what I mean? I'm saying I'm probably closer to 40 years of age, you see what I'm saying, before it actually kicks in, and then I start to, see where it's beneficial at home about the educational part of the extension of what they get in the ISD. Yeah. Because we're not saying that what the ISD presents the child is of no good. That's not what we're saying.
Some of it.
Exactly. And you know what I'm saying? When it comes to, of course, that some stuff, that's a whole another conversation. Yeah. But yeah, again, that is just, I'm that spirit. I was one of the ones that had questions in Sunday school, you know what I mean? About that. So it was just in me, sis.
And people talk about like being woke or their awakening in several different phases, but You know, like I said, I think a lot of my studies started when I was 18 years old. So that's what, maybe 20 years ago. But the way that you approach things is a little bit different when you have your own children. And so I've been a teacher since I graduated college, even though my major was finance and accounting. But when I had children, my purpose or my intentions changed a little bit. And so knowing that my children were in an education system that would not teach them knowledge of self, because I didn't get it in my education system, in church, at home. So knowing that that's not something that they would have received in their public school journey, I knew, one, that I needed to supplement that at home, but also, two, I had an extreme problem with the fact that the majority of black children would go through a public education system and graduate and be in a space to where they did not know who they were not confident in who they were, therefore would never ever be someone who could perform at their highest potential. So part of the work that we do is, one, trying to create public school spaces in a way that black children can thrive. And then two, for those families that do have an opportunity to homeschool, giving them some guidance and support on how they can create homeschool spaces for their children. And then even those families that want a hybrid of that. So perhaps their children do go to public schools, you don't necessarily have the current capacity or want to, to fully homeschool your child, but you do know that there's some things that need to be discussed at home. There's some things that have to be taught at home so they can be prepared for this walk. So tell me a little bit. I know that your children are they're completely out of the public school system. So tell us, were they ever in the public school system? If not, how did you all get to that point? And what does your current approach to education look like for your children and your family at home?
Gotcha. Public school, first of all, we're just going back to what you topped it off with, what you started off with. Public school, in my opinion, as it relates to our culture, it's going to be a real, what would you call it, tedious task to go into that system and really get it to where it can cater like we need it to cater. You see what I'm saying? To us culturally.
Right.
So the reason why I'm starting off by saying that, I realized that it was no way, unless, of course, we going in large, and let's just say we're talking about one city. Let's just say that. If we're able to unify in one city, like Rosewood and, you know what I'm saying, Tulsa, Oklahoma was, those communities, you feel me? If we're able to do that, then that's where we could really push that public arena to cater again and to our cultural necessities. You see. So again, me realizing that that's going to be a tedious task, I say I got to grab mine. Now, of course, like I'm saying, the universe had it set up to where it worked out in my own personal situation. But my wife, of course, from off the top, my son is a second grader at this time. He's 13 today. And at this time, he's a second grader. When I'm saying, I'm about to take my baby, my last two.
Right.
You see what I'm saying? I got 5, 3, of course, did the traditional, you know what I mean? But my baby girl, which is 19 today, you see what I'm saying? She didn't enter into public high school. Okay. She's a homeschool graduate of her class, which would have been last year. You see? And my son, like I'm saying, is 13 today, was a second grader. He started homeschool with dad. Again, see, my situation catered towards me being the administrator.
The ability to provide that direct instruction.
Yes.
Okay.
Me being the sole administrator as far as the curriculum of this, what we doing here, what we labeling homeschool and all. And yes, there was resistance from my wife. So she don't mind me saying this.
Some discourse and conversation.
You see what I'm saying? Yeah,
come
like
to agreement.
Yeah.
On the approach.
And a little,
persuasion.
A little energy aggressive energy towards the situation,
Yeah,
but not.
sit down a little bit.
You see what I'm saying?
Okay.
You see where I'm going?
Okay.
Yeah, like, hey now, hey, you see what I'm saying? Look at this, like we need to look at it now.
Right.
And then of course we fast forward to the day and everything is good. But what I'm saying here is this baby, my son, would be in the 2nd grade again, and my daughter would finish the 8th grade. So both of them.
So about 5 years y'all have been about 5 years in educating them specifically at home.
There you have it. Because 2015 is when I went to the school district and withdrew both of them.
Mm-hmm.
August the 6th, 2015. I never forget the day.
So I want to talk about the curriculum and content that you provide to your children, and there's certain aspects of that.
Mm-hmm.
But before we get into the curriculum and content,
Okay.
or I don't want to say before, as we approach curriculum and content, tell me a little bit about the self-efficacy or the self-confidence that you see in your children, like over that 5-year progression, and what you attribute that to. Because a lot of my concern with Black children being in public schools is specifically their self-confidence, their self-efficacy, and their mental fortitude. So tell me about how you've seen that grow over the last 5 years and how you all approach that at home.
I'm so glad that you asked that, because my son, and both of them, but my son in particular, was being, I'm going to call it bullied,
Mm-hmm.
in the 2nd grade, you see. And I used self-control,
Mm-hmm.
you see what I'm saying, and went ahead and, like, as we can see, did what I did, because that played a role. The way that I'm seeing it be physically abused, you know what I'm saying, because he one of them that's not going, I'm talking about, start nothing.
Right.
You know what I mean? But I would see physical, evidence.
From children or from adults?
From children.
Okay.
You know what I'm saying?
Because our children get it from both.
That's right. That's right.
Regularly in
That's
schools.
Right. You know what I mean? Daddy, we were playing out at the field. You know what I mean? Like I said, okay, I'm a boy. I was a boy and I played, but this bruise look. You know what I mean? And we would have our communication. I talked to whatever father to son, and I would start figuring out that, okay,
it's something else going on.
And the teacher, of course, they send letters home every day, so you see the bruise on his head. It's on his head, so you don't feel like it's necessary to just explain in the folder like
what's going on.
You know what I'm saying? Yeah, this is what blah blah blah. That never happened.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? And a lot of other instances that really drove me to, you see what I'm saying, yeah, we need to do this. Now fast forward to the self-esteem and seeing evidence of, the self-efficacy. Both of them. Fast forward to the day, like I'm saying, I have a 13-year-old son and a 19-year-old daughter right
Mm-hmm.
now that are products of this homeschooling. And they both right now are standing on their own in a entrepreneur type way right now. My son is an aspiring master guitarist and an aspiring master chef at 13.
Right.
And I'm gonna say him being taken out of public school and getting the distraction, because a lot of time it could be a distraction for the baby. Because as our sons, we feel like he gotta play football. He got to play basketball. He got to play.
It's like 2 or 3 paths that they have to be on.
You see what I'm saying? And then you leave out these entrepreneur avenues that it's in them, but they sit it to the side because of this curriculum, you see, that is promoted within the independent school district. So fast forward, and like I'm saying, with my two that I see, the evidence is 100% on the positive.
Yeah.
Let's just make a long story short on that, on both of them. My baby girl is showing how she's, having enough confidence to call herself a astronumerologist.
Okay.
At 19. You see what I'm saying?
Okay.
Into mixing the science of astrology and numerology together, where she's into the tarot, reading the cards, except all that. You see what I'm saying? Right now. Yoga inspired. You see what I'm saying? All of that.
Yeah. Okay. So let me ask you this, because a lot of the tie-in for mental fortitude and self-efficacy has a lot to do with understanding yourself and who you are and what your abilities your capacities are.
Yes.
The public school system, I do not believe does a good job, or let me rephrase that. The public school system fails black children as it relates to making sure they understand who they are and what their potential is. I actually believe that some of the intent of the public school system is to ensure that our children are not confident and are not secure in who they are, which in turn does not allow them to reach their full potential. So I have some strong beliefs as it relates to what cultural studies and historical knowledge does to a person's esteem and understanding. But tell me what your thoughts are on that and how you've approached that with your children and making sure that they can be a master chef and a master guitarist and creating new lanes in regards to what it is that they want to do with their life path.
Man, that's the foundation of it all. That's the foundation of it all. And I will 100% agree with you when you say that within the independent school district, there is not a actual, let's say, a GPS system for that black baby, that black child. You see what I'm saying?
Well, there's probably a GPS system. It just doesn't end in a spot that's one that we would want for the majority of our children.
Gotcha.
I think there's a path.
Yeah, you're right. You're absolutely right about that. Yeah, and there's one, full of a lot of stress.
Mm-hmm.
And the reason why I say it is because you have to pick on this piece of paper who you want to be. Who do you want to be? You know what I mean? When you start going into, of course, high school is stress. You start sitting down with a counselor and talking about, the next level, etc. And at this stage of the baby's life, a lot of times, like I've talked about before with my good brother Barleen, we talked about how, conversation with the youngsters, and they always, when I ask them, what you talking about taking up in school?
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? What you looking to do? Oh, I want to own my own business, so
mm-hmm.
I'm gonna take up business management. But that baby doesn't see. This is why we're saying education is important, because that baby does not know that in order for you to be a business owner or entrepreneur, you do not necessarily have to take a business management course in college.
Right.
So therefore, this child goes, and a lot of times in our community, in our culture, their loans that's being taken out.
Mm-hmm.
And these loans create stress.
Right. Absolutely.
And then the baby, a lot of times, because the baby was confused to begin with on who they really were, they just picked this piece of this title, this egoic title on this piece of paper that has led them into a stressful lifestyle.
Right.
To
now
where she talking about
loans back, and now you got to put yourself in a job or in a position that you really don't enjoy. But now it's a cycle because you owe these loans, you got your bills now.
See,
and it's a cycle that you get put in.
And she's possibly say that the reason why I'm on this pole because I'm trying to pay for college.
Mm-hmm.
Possibly. See, that can happen as well. And then she'll find herself on the pole for a lifetime because she realized that wasn't even really who I was anyway.
Yeah, because the majority of black students in college are there on loans.
See?
They're there on loans.
See?
So let me ask you this. I think this is a good parallel here. So, you talked about if I want to be an entrepreneur, business management may not necessarily be the best major for you at all. Business management is who you're hiring to be your manager or your.
Thank you. Walmart, yes. Walgreens, McDonald's, etc.
But with that, you said that you don't necessarily have to have this course to be an entrepreneur. So there's specific skill sets and specific things that go into being a successful entrepreneur versus being a successful factory worker versus being a successful manager somewhere. But a lot of the concern about homeschool, and everybody approaches homeschool a different way, but a lot of the concern about homeschool is deciding
the workforce.
What do I teach, what do I prioritize, and how do I approach it? So when I talk to homeschool families, I really, one of the first things I do is sit down and listen to what their priorities are as a family, what their philosophical understandings and approaches are as a family, and then what is the end goal, for that child specifically. And that is what guides your day-to-day approach of what it is that you choose to teach your children. So tell me, you said you have somebody that's creating their own lane in astronumerology. And then we have a guitarist/chef who can probably put on a cold brunch in a couple of years. But tell us, how do you decide what it is that they need to learn? Because most people automatically look to a list of standards or a list of things that they need to check off the list. But that's not a necessity if you choose to homeschool your children. You can decide what the path is. So how did you all decide what that path was for your family?
Man, that's a good one. Again, that started with me. You see what they call the head, representing the pioneer, you see. And knowledge of self is the curriculum. That's what I always tell people. I told this woman that the older lady that stopped by the house one time and told me she was been checking me out, and she realized what was going on, and she wanted me to homeschool her grandchildren, her grandboys. So I told her, and this is basically like the question that you're asking now is basically how I answered her was. Everybody doesn't, not looking for the same thing out of it, because like I told her, your lifestyle might be different from mine at the house. Like I told her, there's very little TV on. You see what I'm saying? I let the satellite go way before, these babies even were homeschooled. So it's a very intimate setting at home, first of all, but the curriculum is directly attached to knowledge of self. What do I mean by knowledge of self? Is the studies or the curriculum of the 7 liberal arts. Now we're talking about culture. And in my house, it will be labeled Moorish science is what's being taught, which was handed from the Commissions to the Moors, you see, for us to advance it. So in my house, you see, as for me in my house, we will serve the Lord. And when we talk about the Lord, we're talking about the universal God that's connected to these 7 liberal arts.
Tell us a little bit about what those 7 are.
Astrology, astronomy, music, rhetoric, logic, algebra, geometry. And when we say algebra and geometry, we're talking about sacred mathematics. Exactly. Sacred meaning a Holy Trinity is mother, father, child. You see, that's sacred geometry. You see, so that's what's being taught in our household. And when these babies, of course, get into the curriculum of knowledge of self or Moorish science, you see, they'll find who they are, because we got what we call a GPS, which is called your natal chart or your birth chart, which is the science, you see what I'm saying, that is being practiced in my home. So that's how the babies end up, you see what I'm saying, finding out, and then of course it comes through genetics too. Because you like you're saying, you're passionate about teaching because you come from the womb of a teacher. You see what I'm saying? My son come from the womb of a woman that her uncle is, you see what I'm saying, is a musician. And then his father, you see what I'm saying, on my side of his DNA, master guitar. You see how it's working? We got to know that. So that's part of, that's the foundation of the curriculum in our household is, again, Moorish science, or simply knowledge of self. That's what it is. It's cultural. You see what I'm saying? And of course, that you got inside of you will make a way for you, a living for you, or whatever, because it comes straight from the Creator.
I want to talk a little bit about some of the resources or the approaches that you use to actually, teach your children. But before that, knowledge of self is something that I think is so important for our families to understand, for individuals to understand, but anybody that's responsible for the upbringing of a child. And I can't think of the author's name right now, but it's a book called Community of Self. And one of the first things that it talks about, it basically talks about your roles and responsibility to self before you can address your role and responsibilities to family, before you can address your role and responsibility to the community. But in each of those facets, part of that responsibility is knowing who you are and from whence you came and why you're here. I think if you choose to have your children in the public school system or not, I think it's so important to understand that the public school system does not do that. It does not explain to black children who they are. It doesn't explain to black children what we stand for, and it doesn't explain to black children why we are here. And so even if you don't choose to fully homeschool your child, I personally believe that it is everybody's responsibility to instruct their children on who we are. And if as a black parent you don't know the answer to that, then your first responsibility is to find out who the hell you are, so that you can then instruct your children and your family on who they are. So with that part there, what resources can, if someone's choosing to fully homeschool or if someone's just choosing to supplement specifically at home, and I think if you're choosing to supplement at home, that knowledge of self and that cultural understanding is of the utmost important. I want to know what you lean on, but tell us what you would recommend someone that's entering into this work lean on, and then tell us a little bit about those things that you currently lean on, or how you've led your children on a path of their own self-discovery.
Gotcha. And of course, we would use the I'm gonna say the traditional outlets, education.com, and I used personally, these are some that we use personally, education.com and Khan's Academy for that, just that reading, writing, and arithmetic part. Right. You see what I'm saying? Then now, when we get to the cultural curriculum part of it, that's when you go into, your own secret, and I really mean this, your own secret closet or hiding place, and you really ask God for direction on where to go with this thing. Right. That would be my advice to one, because like you and I talked before off camera the other day, I don't want to feel like I'm somebody's savior, and you see what I'm saying? Right. Like you follow what I follow. You see what I'm saying? But we of course can give you some tidbits. But when it comes to your own children and this homeschool concept, I'm gonna say really don't get in a microwavable, you know what I'm saying, like instant gratification type. Don't get into that mode.
So then let me ask it from this direction, and I agree with you on that, because I don't prescribe a blueprint, and I think it's extremely important if you're making the decision to homeschool, don't switch one blueprint out for another. Because the reason you're choosing to homeschool is making sure that you're molding your child to their best potential. So maybe I should ask the question this way: what questions should parents ask themselves, or what are some of the questions that parents should ask themselves when they are deciding what it is to teach their children? So for example, one of the first things that I wanted to decide when giving my children knowledge at home is, what to them, how am I approaching, what God is, what the universe is, how am I approaching what good and bad is, or what karma or reciprocity is. So what are some of the questions that perhaps parents should ask themselves so that they can start figuring out, these are things that I need to make sure that me and my child are on one accord about in regards to how they walk this life?
Yes. That was powerful in itself right there, because who God is, where God is, and what God is, that's very important off the muscle, because that's gonna be the foundation of the child knowing who they are. Right. Because when we go back to this picking this title, egoic title, or my job title off the paper. See, a lot of babies get lost in the title and not knowing that you are God before you the title. And the title, a lot of times, it goes and it sucks that child into a unhealthy way of living. You understand? So you should ask, like, financially, as it relates to generational wealth and financial literacy. How can we build as a family, and how can I assist my child in building generational wealth without getting raped by the corporation. And when we say rape, of course, that's in a symbolic way, meaning mentally. You see, because again, those egoic titles or job titles, they serve a purpose. We're not dismissing that fact that they do serve a purpose. For, like we're saying, just like all children can't be homeschooled,
right.
all children are not going to have the motivation to be owners.
Right.
You have to have some worker bees.
Everybody's not
a owner.
Everybody's not a teacher.
And
everybody's not a boss.
You see? And what we're doing is we're trying to mold that child in being the best worker bee or CEO that we can make them, but without the stress of, like we're saying about college, family. We gotta really be for real about that thing about college and those loans and how they create a lot of stress, man.
And
you know what I mean?
There's a lot of stress created for our children well before college.
Yes.
You know, you mentioned your second grade son and, you know, bullying he was going through. You also mentioned, you know, you have your youngest daughter that's 19.
The cliques, they got to deal with the cliques.
I encourage families, if you have not asked your children, or if you cannot explain to somebody else what your child's experience is day to day in school, it is extremely important for you to tap in into what is going on. The mental stress that our children deal with from every single direction. One, peers, you know, the same way that you see on social media, the same way that you see on reality television shows. Teenagers and children are emulating those actions in school, and so our children, and we didn't have to grow up in the world of social media. So I would caution you to say that I know exactly what you're going through in regards to how your child feels with some of this social media stuff, because you don't. Because that's not how we had to grow up. So the microscope that they live under as it relates to social media, and as it relates to their peers, but also the biases that they face every day as it relates to every single adult that they see in a school setting. You know, and that's black and white, because black people have classist bias as well. I'm not going to delve into that too much in this episode, but my intent is to say that our children deal with biases from adults that have preconceived perceptions of them. Our black girls, of course, they're loud, they're boisterous, they're over-sexualized. Our black boys are aggressive. They're, you know, they're very hyper, exactly. And so these are things that they deal with, and we haven't even started to discuss the curriculum that's put in front of them every day, and the you know, the subconscious messages that they receive from day to day. So the mental stress that our children deal with in public school every day is extremely, extremely heavy, which is why I encourage every family to start off with insulating their child's mental fortitude with whatever time you have available. If it's a car ride, if it's sitting in front of a documentary, if it's reading a book out loud, if it's driving past a historical landmark, if it's taking a situation that they told you about with a certain child and making sure that they understand the philosophical and moral attributes of how they should approach that. But if you are not intentionally addressing your child's mental health, then I encourage you to make that a priority immediately for your child. And I don't know how I got on that rant, but because that it fit right with what we were saying about the job titles and low self-esteem becoming a stressor from the loans. And you was just saying how, of course, that the babies, they endure stress, mental stress, way before the loans, which is true. And I just wanted to add this piece real quick. It's an extension from, watch this, both the church and the school as it relates to the cliques. You can relate because you're a pastor's daughter. Absolutely.
The pastor's children is in a different realm. The poor baby, the rich baby, the ugly girl, the fat girl, the skinny girl, you see what I'm saying? The poor family that they all kind of smell like pee. When they, you see,
none of that's,
all of those different cliques are, like you saying, have been illuminated more now in this generation because you got social media. All them babies ain't got a phone the way they can post and all them house and stuff where they take pics don't look, you know what I mean, like the other, etc. To where going back to what we're talking about, homeschooling, you, like you say, you get to insulate that baby's mind. You see? And I want to add this part real quick. My baby girl, she dealt more with the social part of it at first.
Oh yeah, yeah.
Because of course she would be entering high school. We've been waiting to do that since we started, you know what I mean, elementary. We've been waiting to, you see? So she ended up, like I told her, I say, hey boo, listen, I'll take you to the game still. You still can talk to your friends or whatever. It's all good. To make a long story short, I eventually would stop having to take her to the games because she stopped asking.
You weren't even feeling it like that.
You see how that worked? Going back to what you're saying, insulating that baby's mind.
Yeah.
See, her mind started to be insulated from that independent school district frequency.
Right.
Everybody graduating confused.
Yep.
And not really knowing where and they scared, and they just really going with what society says.
Yep.
And then my young guys in East Texas, everybody think they going to the NFL. So they gonna be, you know what I mean, footballed up. Until they realize, man, you ain't, hey, that's a big old bucket, bro.
Big old bucket.
Politics is involved in that as well.
Everybody ain't gonna make it.
You see?
Yeah.
So that was, a lot of this was a part of me protecting mine, because I was a recruited athlete, basketball. You see what I'm saying? Coming out of high school. So I know the politics of it all is what I'm saying. And I know how these babies can be ruined by that system.
I worked at U of H athletics in college, so I saw a lot of how they work. Now you said, because I don't want to miss this thought, about being able to see something else, you know, outside of football or outside of what society prescribes.
Yes.
So, and you know, your daughter not even necessarily asking to go to the football game or to go to the ticket spot. So, by insulating them and by giving them that space to think and, you know, really grow into who they are, I think it's important for us to realize that once a lot of that noise is silenced, just like it works with adults, our children are able to really be able to create a vision for themselves, as opposed to the vision that, you know, society has created for them and the vision that they hear from the adults that they see at school every day. When you pull them from that space, they're able to create the vision from themselves based upon what it is that they're truly aligned to, because they're not seeing their friends or their peers, you know, trying to convince them to be a part of certain things or to like certain things or to do certain things. And so her desires or her wants or, you know, what it is that she's speaking truly is a full culmination of her thoughts, not, you know, a synthesis of hers and 5 or 6 of her friends. So I think that that's important to talk about how children need to have that space to really grow and kind of, you know, play around and kind of, you know, think about what their options are until they really can decide who they are before someone just tells them that you're the loud person in the room or that you're the boisterous person in the room or you're going to grow up to be the star athlete. He may not even want to play football in 9th grade, but he's heard it for so long. Now he feels like if he tells his mom he doesn't want to do that anymore, now he's squashing her dreams.
Exactly.
Because all he's heard is I'm finna buy her a house.
Yep.
I'm finna retire you from your job.
Yep.
So we need to make sure that we give our children a comfortable, safe space to, you know, to share who they are and what their dreams are specifically for themselves.
Man, that's powerful in itself.
You mentioned, and you know, I'm gonna kind of conclude here on these thoughts. You mentioned a little bit about how, you know, eventually she didn't want to necessarily go to all of the football games or things. How did you approach certain things that they may have missed or that they were used to when they first came out of public schools, versus how do they approach their, you know, their socializations or friendships, or what is the community that's around your children now? What does their community of peers look like since it's not the public school?
They've attracted pretty much family members, you know, that they you know have grown up with anyway. They've kept them, you know, within the well, and that's basically it. You know, they're like some of like my baby girl, some of her school friends, you know, that they were like buddy in school. They slipped, you know, just like this. They went this way.
Not equally.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And that's what it boiled down to, and that's okay.
Right.
And what I do is I explain. Well, what I did was I explained it the whole time. Along the way, I explained
what was going on.
You see what I'm saying to my baby, like, you see, okay, this is what's going on. You see what I'm saying?
That's probably part of that logic class a couple of times.
There you have it. There you have it. That logic class, because that's the key. You know what I mean? We're just making sense out of it. You know what I mean? The whole nine. But yeah, the actual transition part of it, to be honest with you, it was easier for me than it was for them because they had to, you know what I mean, go through it. Like, yeah, but they got through it pretty well. And like I'm saying, they attracted the soul team or the soul squad. Yeah. That's just really what it boiled down to. When like we're saying here, you get that child and you insulate their mind and they get to know who they are. The law of attraction will, you know, it is what it is. It's going to work. So those friends, quote unquote, that should be in their life is going to come. And like I'm saying now, I've seen pretty much their family members that they grew up with able to see, though, the difference as well. Because a lot of these family members, they had to go through, they didn't get to experience homeschool like their cousins. You see what I'm saying? But they able to see the difference. They able to see, like, man, I got to deal with this, but you don't. You know what I mean? Not to sound egotistical about it, but just on the, like we're saying, on the psychological side of it. We know that these babies coming out of the independent school traditional system, they're confused. You see what I'm saying? Yeah. And a lot of that confusion they didn't see on my babies. Yeah. You know what I mean? Because they were able to be, like you're saying, insulated from it. But still, they're able to gain something from it. That's obvious because they, like I'm saying, it's a group of them that's still connected. Right. Family members, though, more so than schoolmates or school friends.
So a couple of things that we've told our parents or listeners who may be thinking about homeschool is, you know, definitely everybody's approach is unique. Everybody's approach is different. There's certain questions that, you know, you're going to want to ask yourself about what's important for you and your family as it relates to the type of child that you want to raise. As we close out, though, are there any other things that you recommend that families be mindful of as they approach this homeschool journey? Are there some sore spots that you could probably anticipate? Are there some roadblocks that you could probably maneuver in advance? What are your thoughts there?
Yeah, with your children, there definitely will be some sense of resistance to begin with, but that goes back to what you were saying earlier about it's important to stress within this family circle who God is, what God is, and where God is. Yes. You see, that's very important because that would allow some leeway within, you know what I mean, this whole resistance of, you know what I mean, of course, because anything new, you know what I mean, as it relates to something like this, homeschool, the where you at home, you know what I mean? And then, too, like you said, for those that are not able to homeschool, the curriculum part of it needs to be stressed at home more. Yeah. Since you can't, you see what I'm saying, eliminate that public school vibration all the way, you know what I mean, completely. So I will say that part, that if you are one of those spirits out there that really want something more for your children, and you want to see their education actually, you know what I mean, allow them to succeed holistically, you have to take them to the public school. You just gotta know that you gotta go like overtime at home, really. Yeah. You know what I mean? That's just really what it boiled down to. But the actual, for those of us that are able to go all outright homeschool without the public school, the resistance is gonna be there, but like the sisters say, you have to establish, I mean, that's really the main thing. You have to establish who God is and where God is and what God is. And that will allow you to be led. You see, your discernment and your intuition kicks in to how to deal with this child. Because we know each child has a different characteristic, etc., and different needs. You see what I'm saying? So that's why we're saying you definitely have to get into who God is to you, so you can have that universal, holistic guide to where, you see what I'm saying, you're not missing out on nothing. You right on beat with progressing your family, because that is the whole goal of it all,
Right.
when it comes to homeschooling, it ain't just to be fly at the mouth and say my child ain't
Right.
that ain't what it's about. It's really about healing the nation, healing our community, healing the whole underground railroad community. You see what I'm saying? To where as families we are coming out being productive. As productive as that family is, that's as productive as the community will be. And then of course the babies will have a solid foundation for their babies. And then see, we've turned it around when we put work in like that. We've turned our whole movement, you know what I'm saying, our whole existence in life, we've turned it around to where we're doing, because this is another goal, we're doing more hiring and firing than being employed. Yeah. You see, because that's, in my household, personally, my goal is to be able to put myself in position to hire, to employ. You see what I'm saying? And then, of course, my son take that attitude towards life. Yeah. Then my daughter take that toward. Then they have children, and their children take that. You see what I'm saying? That angle at life. Because, like we said the other day, I believe was entrepreneurship and that spirit of owning and wanting to own. It's in your bloodline. It come in the womb. You see what I'm saying? And again, everybody does not have that ability or that motivation, but or that purpose. But those of us that do, like myself, we just have to stress it at home first. You see, set that house on a solid foundation, and then we go from there. And I hope I answered.
You did. And I just want to encourage families that are interested in this homeschool journey. There are, this is not, though your journey is going to be unique to you and your family, it's not a journey that you have to take alone. Right. I think the last episode we had 2 members of the Tyler Homeschool Collective who talked a little bit about their homeschool journey. Okay. They have a support group. I know there's several organizations in the Houston area with Homeschool Collaborative and cohorts and things of that nature. So if we have any listeners that are specifically interested in, your approach or your philosophy, or just kind of want to follow the work that you're doing and the knowledge that you're sharing, how would they be able to follow your movement? Okay,
via social media, you can contact me, or or get with me on Facebook. Kaleem Bey on Facebook. That's my free national name. You can find me on Facebook. It's Kaleem Bey, Kaleem Bey. And on Instagram, Second Son 9 SEKONDSUN, the number 9. You see, Instagram, and we got, of course, me and my good brother Barlene. We doing a podcast. You see, right here in the press box, that you can find on YouTube. If you search The Press Box on YouTube, and you'll see the Walk With Me videos that we have, the Walk With Me episode of our podcast that we have on there, and via email as well, leotheline57 at gmail.com. That's the number 57, 5 and 7. Leo, LEODALION, the number 57 at gmail.com. If you, like the sister saying, if you got some type of questions or something, because of course I can definitely be a part of a support group, or consider myself to be, supporting anybody that have a desire to homeschool their children. Because I definitely, at this point have 5 years experience. You see what I'm saying?
And I think you have a very unique perspective as a black male who is the primary, primary facilitator of your child's education. That's not, that's not an opportunity where I get to sit down and have that conversation often.
Cool.
Of course, also you can follow us on Instagram at Educating While Black, on Twitter at Educate Black, and then you can also find our website, which is educatingwhileblack.org. Again, we are very grateful to the Pressbox Media Group for hosting the Educating While Black podcast today. Are there any other closing thoughts that you want to make sure that our listeners hear?
No, only thing I gotta say is this was definitely a a humbling experience. You know what I'm saying? Very humbling, and I enjoyed every bit of it. And I would say to the family that, again, if you find it somewhere in your heart, you see what I'm saying, that it's necessary to homeschool your child, do everything that you need to do to follow your heart and follow that through, because we living in a day and time now that is very imperative that we get with these children and we sit down and we're able to actually communicate with them. You see what I'm saying, on a next level. You see what I'm saying? Because these babies growing up, and they need the proper direction. And we don't need to just allow a whole nother generation, you see, to be just bouncing around like, you know, chickens with their heads cut off. So that's basically all I got to say. Peace to the family. You know what I'm saying?
Thank you. One of my favorite quotes, and I'm going to leave you all with this thought, is by Frederick Douglass. It is easier to build strong children than to repair broken men. And thank you again for joining us for another episode of Educating While Black.
Peace.